reader is Can Wiggin. Can keeps folk and fairy tales close and mythology closer, side by side with horror and SF, from the golden age to the digital days. She was first published in the noir zine Hard Luck Stories and has a stack of credits up through the forthcoming anthology in the tribute to the late Joe Pulver, Nightmares in Yellow Volume 2. A proofreader editor, she's had shifts or stints at CNN and TBS, Reuters, Greenville News, and alternative publications since the 90s. In Atlanta for 27 years, she now lives in Athens. So, Ken, why don't you set up your reading for us tonight before you head into your piece?
Okay, hi, can you see me? I'm new at this.
Yes.
Okay, great. This is just something I wrote for you guys. There is no setup. It is about a young woman who's tired of what's happening in her family. We can't choose our relatives, and in her case, that might be a bad thing, but you'll see. And it's called MeeMee. Okay. The day MeeMee came to live with us wasn't even day. She showed up after sundown. The caretaker had forgotten the evening bed check, so my grandmother simply slipped out, as only she could, a sweet, acquiescent smile, the last thing security saw before she slithered out the exit. It was Halloween, the single most important and powerful day on MeeMee's calendar. Forget every kid's calendar in every neighborhood, ever. We opened the door when we heard knuckles hitting the wood. We expected a child in a costume. We got a monster in a meat suit. "Hey there, how are you?" She laughed and laughed, her lower jaw almost touching her bony rib cage. She had the biggest teeth I'd ever seen outside of a stable. She slithered in, dragging a bag that didn't belong to her. "Taking my chances, something's good's inside," she hollered like we were deaf. Maybe we were. Maybe we had been deaf and blind to her and her horror show for so long we couldn't hear or see it. But growing up, we didn't think she was monstrous. We didn't see a horror show. MeeMee was wonderful, beautiful. She could work magic. We loved that, even though we were warned repeatedly to not, absolutely not, under any circumstances, tell anyone she could do things. And by things, I mean magic. When I say magic, I don't mean abracadabra, here's a flower in your hair, here's a quarter behind your ear, here's a rabbit under your chair. I mean, drop a piece of silver in stump water under the full moon if you want someone or something to do your bidding. Put a photo of your enemy in your shoe and walk on that bastard's face until he's ground into the earth. We found out the hard way when MeeMee didn't like a friend, a sweetheart, an acquaintance. They went belly up. We didn't notice because there was always something else waved in front of us that just took our minds off the loss. When I say loss, I mean gone. Not dead, just gone. "If you get along with your family, you don't need friends," she insisted. "The only family I don't get along with is MeeMee," Pop said. It was a joke, but by that time, MeeMee didn't possess a sense of humor. The next day, he had a migraine that turned into a stroke. No lasting damage, but he was careful after that. So years stacked up, and when she seemed old enough, frail enough, helpless enough, we stashed her in an assisted living facility. Mistake. It caught fire that first night. Nobody died, the fire was contained, and because she helped others out, she was lauded by the powers that be. She told everyone she would not have her photo taken because she didn't want publicity. It's because she doesn't cast a reflection, Mom said. That was the last coherent thing out of her for a month. I stewed in my room for those 30 days, scales dropping from my eyes along with tears of loss and rage, and started making my own plans. So when she showed up that night, I was as ready as ever I would be. She didn't suspect I had turned my hand to the family business. Yes, I was the sorcerer's apprentice she should have befriended. But, being the baby of the brood, and therefore of no real consequence, nobody paid attention to me. This gave me worlds to walk between, and I took that advantage. Magic should be spread out so things can grow. Otherwise, you're the dragon in the fairy tale, keeping all that gold to yourself, which describes MeeMee. She turned malevolent, bit by bloody bit. Or maybe she had always flown wicked, and we hadn't realized it because we were taught to love what was ours. And it was love that strengthened my resolve. Love for people I bound myself to protect before she devoured them like gingerbread. And when she slithered upstairs to visit my attic bedroom, there were witch jars, beautiful spun glass prisons, and plenty of salt to keep her busy, grain by grain by grain. Not even MeeMee could fight that. And like MeeMee taught us, sometimes you have to hug people you don't like so you'll know how big to dig the hole in your backyard. When I bent down and embraced her, MeeMee screamed, but nobody heard a thing. That's it. Thank you.
So I love the Southern Gothic in that. And sometimes you got to hug somebody so you know how big a grave to dig. That's
Yes.
excellent stuff. So what are some of your favorite Southern Gothics?
I don't read a lot of Southern Gothic, I've been told, which I find very funny. So I have read the obvious Flannery O'Connor, Carson McCullers. I wrote white papers on them when I was in college. And then I just sort of drifted away from them. I read Truman Capote because he also was Southern Gothic. Let's see. I read a lot of noir, and I read a lot of crime procedurals. I love mythology. And if you get the gods mad at you or the powers that come in and out of those worlds, you're in trouble.
Well, on a similar note, I'm a big fan of The King in Yellow and Robert Chambers.
Yes.
And read some of his odder bits, like of his oeuvre, like Into the Unknown, which is like a cryptids book. So,
Yes.
what inspired you to take a journey into the world of Robert Chambers?
Well, I looked at it as a challenge. It was a really strange book. I read it first years ago. I came to Robert Chambers through H.P. Lovecraft first. I will tell you that. I had my best friend in high school and we read it. Now, when you're a kid, that stuff is really potent because I had not read anything like that. At the time, I saw what he was, but that was everywhere in the Deep South for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So you either ignored it or you threw it across the room, and I tended to do both. But that aside, I came to M.R. James and Robert Aikman and Robert Chambers and all these others. So for that, I'm happy I did read the Lovecraft because it was a springboard into better adventures. And I was Joe Pulver, the late Joe Pulver. Before he died, people were getting, Dwayne Passis was getting a tribute volume to him. Unfortunately, he won't see it on this side of the veil, but I wanted to write a story called The Queen in Yellow. And it's sort of a split between a character that would have been in that mythos, and then bringing it forward into the 1920s on Earth, like what would happen because evil goes everywhere.
Nice. Well, that's next year, right?
Yeah, I believe it may be out by the holidays.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to reading it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Cam, for joining us tonight.
And my next story, just for you, Alex, is Little Buddy Gus.
Awesome. Looking forward to
Thanks
all
so
of it.
much for having me. It was really a blast.
All right. So being part of